Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Patricia and I'm an agronomy business representative at Dorian. I have a plant science background and as a Dorian, we work with many agricultural leaders in the space. We would like to share with you some of our learnings and hopefully also give you some insight about the future trends in the sector. And today we will be talking about designing multifactorial trials. So I'll be sharing my presentation and as well we will work with our tool Blumeo to give you some sort of visualization of the process as well. Today we're going to talk about designing smarter trials and evaluating interaction effects. Just to quickly run through what we cover today. So first, I will describe what is an agronomy trial for the purpose of this webinar. Then we will talk about trial design, what are the challenges, what are the best practices. Then we will move to discuss valorizing for the climatic context and collecting data from multiple sources. And then we will finish with data analytics after we go through all of the steps, of course, to try and draw some conclusions from our data sets. So to briefly introduce Dorian, we are based in Nice. We are a company of 32 employees and we have many years of experience in agricultural software. Our software is used everywhere around the world by different teams, from technical institutes and startups to big seed companies and product companies as well. And every year, more than 250,000 trials are managed using our platform. And to introduce Blumeo to those who are not familiar with us yet, Blumeo is a full-scope trial management platform, and we have several modules. So we have a product development module that doesn't only allow you to collect all of your trials in one place, but it also has additional functionalities of meta-analytics, market segmentation, and collecting grower feedback. We are also currently developing our breeding module, which will be launched later this year, and it will be one of the most innovative breeding solutions on the market. But today we will focus on our agronomy testing module, which is specifically tailored to multifactorial trials and testing more than one factor at the same time. So what is an agronomy trial? So an agronomy trial is an experiment that is conducted in controlled or real field conditions. The purpose of it is to evaluate varieties, products, agricultural practices, inputs, and it often includes multiple factors tested at the same time. So this is our focus today. How can we test multiple factors and their combinations together? What are the common objectives of agronomy trials? So first is, of course, understanding the interaction effects between variety and product and environmental factors. So let's say we are already having a complex layer of genetic variation. Then we also are adding a layer of complexity using a product, and we also have our environmental factors that sometimes we cannot even control. So the data sets that we're working with are very complex and varied. It's very important to choose good practices for analytics. Also, agronomy trials are used in evaluating agricultural practices and cultivation methods, such as agroecology, agroforestry, as well as testing crop rotations. So these are trials that have been conducted through multiple locations, multiple years, and combining them together and drawing meaningful conclusions is also pretty challenging. So jumping straight into the design, here you can see some examples of factor combinations that can be tested. For example, genotype and tilling method, product, soil pH, irrigation type, or product, genotype, and irrigation type. However, it's not so straightforward as it may seem, and there are certain challenges that you need to consider before designing the protocol. So the first difficulty is that you have a lot of possibilities. If you're using more than 2 factors, your trial is already very complex by design, not accounting for all the different environmental factors that will also impact the data set. So it's very important to stick to 2-3 factors maximum and not overcomplicate things, especially given that the statistical tools are also not infinite in their capacity to show you the significant factors. Field constraints is more of on a practical side. So the equipment availability, labor, and weather conditions. So designing a trial, let's say I'm designing a genotype and tilling method trial here in France. I have certain capacity of labor available, certain weather condition and equipment availability. But will my partner, for example, in Brazil, that is replicating my trial, have the same capacity to perform this trial and provide me with the data set that is compatible for further analysis? Or will next year I will have sufficient capacity to perform a trial that can be comparable? So when you're designing a trial, it's important to be realistic on the capabilities that you have to actually perform the design. The third difficulty is unclear objectives. So it is very important to stick with the factors that you're analyzing and with the combination that you're testing. So for example, if I'm looking into genotypes and tilling methods, of course the soil pH, of course the climate will impact that data set, but it's very important not to stray away and look for other interactions and really focus the design to reveal the interaction between your core factors. That trial design, so this is more common than you might think, but selecting a good design for your multifactorial trials can really ease things up in the trial management phase, and we will give you some examples of good practices. So as I mentioned, limiting it to 2-3 factors, and a good trial design could be split plot, strip plot, or split plot. Here you can see an example of 4 product and 3 genotype and 3 replication trial design. So it is obviously randomized, but by selecting a main factor being a factor that can be applied in strips, you ease up your trial management process. So for example, product can be applied uniformly across the strip, even if it contains different genotypes. The same goes for irrigation, the same goes for tilling practice. So choosing a split plot design, you're easing up the trial management process. So of course you all conduct trials, hopefully, I assume. As we have many people today, I would be very interested in, to know what sort of designs you most commonly use. So we will have an interactive bit of a poll. So please vote. And while you're voting, I will switch to Blumeo to show you how can we do those complex protocols for split plot trial. Okay, so here's Blumeo. This is my workspace, and here I have all of my trials. I have some multi-environment trials, some standalone trials, and I can see their progress. I can see all of my growing locations, all of my trial fields, and here I have a quick overview of the trial progress of the year, of the species, and which research station, business unit, or department is performing the trial, and the treatment count. Now let's go straight into creating a new protocol. We're choosing agro testing, and I will name it Webinar 2025. The period, the starting date is compulsory, but the ending date is not obligatory, so I will leave it blank for now. For a responsible, I'm choosing myself. Organization, you can choose your research station here. Species, I'll do corn, and in France. Here you can also describe the field more precisely, which I encourage you to do. And in design settings, we're choosing split plot. As you can see, we have all the other designs as well, but because we're using best practices, we're choosing split plot and 3 replications. Here you can see tags, which I also encourage you to use because they help you categorize the trial. As we talked, for example, the example that I'm doing right now will be a genotype and product trial. But if I know certain other factors that might impact this trial, I might select them there. So it will allow me to categorize that data set with those additional attributes. So for example, I know that this soil has low pH, so I will add it here. And then if I will want to have an overview of all the trials that happen in low pH, I will be able to do that using the filtering of tags. Okay. We go further to select our variables that we will observe. We have all of our variables. It can be picture, it can be percentage value, it can be formulas, it can be integers, it can be any predetermined value that you want. And you can also edit what exactly you want to collect in the field for that specific trial. And we're moving to the core part of our protocol design, is factors and modalities. So here, as I mentioned, I'm choosing a genotype and a product trial. So I'm taking a genotype, and I'll just take some corn genotypes here, let's say 4. And I will add another factor, which would be product. So let's say this, this, and this. As you can see in the product section, you also have the ability to create mixes. So if any products that you're testing have let's say an adjuvant together mixed in, we can select that as well. You also have a possibility to add dosage. So I'll just use one example, just to give you an example of 2 liters per hectare. And then you can see that, okay, this is the product dosage for this treatment. For genotype as well, we have all of our 4 options, and you can also create mixes if, for example, you're testing multiple genotype mix in forage research. And we will move forward to select any location in France and plan our trial. Now in treatments, what Blumeo does, what is very helpful when designing those complex trials, it automatically gives me all the possible combinations. So I'm seeing my product with the dosage that I applied and all the 4 genotypes. So normally, if you're confident, you complete all the treatments, but if you see that, okay, you will be missing some plots, you can exclude them from the analytics as well. And then you are able to see all of your plots. So I have all my 36 plots generated with the labels. I can create QR labels if I'm working in the field. And here I am managing my design options. So hopefully you remember from what I mentioned before, as a main factor, it is best in the split plot design to choose a factor that can be reproduced in strips. So the product would be my main factor. So I can apply my product in a strip and have my different genotypes placed in a row. Then I can perform randomization and see all of my trial logs. Okay, let's go back to the presentation and see the results of your poll. Okay, so most of you are using randomized complete blocks, which makes sense. It's a robust design. But I also see a lot of people already using split plot design. So as I mentioned, just for the convenience and management of the trial, for the best practices and to reduce the amount of possible errors, it is the best to choose split plot design if you are testing multiple factors. Okay, now we are moving forward, and let's say we have performed our trials, we have established our protocol, we had perfect field conditions, we collected an amazing data set, and now we'll find out exactly how the product and genotype works together. Probably you all realize that this is not the full truth, because all of the additional factors that we have not accounted for such as irrigation, sowing density, agricultural practice, they're still impacting that data set. So let's see how those impacts affect our data. So of course, the climate can affect the efficacy of your products and the disease resistance, yield, and stress tolerance of your variety. Soil conditions as well affect root development of crops. Biologicals, as we know, are living substances that are extremely sensitive to environmental impacts, and each trial, the results are different because the environment have been impacting the biological being differently. And of course, you have climate variation. So what can we do? We can start designing 5-factorial trials or 6-factorial trials and include all of those different factors and try to account for them all. As I mentioned before, of course, this is not a good practice, and this would not even we would not even have statistical tools to successfully help us identify the factors that are giving us the most impact. So the best practice in this case is to have a structured database, to have a database that not only centralizes all your data, but allows you to categorize the data and allows you to make that trial a unique piece of a puzzle. That's why it's very important to valorize data coming from different sources about that data set. So if, for example, you are testing a product and a genotype interaction across many locations, multiple years, and you're doing meta-analytics with your database, you are maybe starting to notice, okay, everywhere that this agricultural practice has been used, I see more positive results. Then you can start to design trials, including agricultural practice as additional factor to identify whether your hypothesis is true or could be true. That's how you build a more unique and a more precise understanding of your product, of your genotype, and all the different factors impacting it. So what are the different sources that we can get our data from? So first is drones, sensors, and satellites. They can be through an API connected to your database. These do not only provide you weather conditions, but they also provide you information about the field, about the distribution of growth, about any maybe unexpected events that happen in the field that affect your data set. You have harvesting machines and weighting scales. You can also create an API with those systems to your database. The same goes for your soil sample analysis, pictures and comments you made in the field, lab reports, or any other databases that you have. So through creating all of those connections, you then enrich your data set with all of those additional information. Now let's move to the most fun part of the webinar, which is statistics. So what can I do when I have my data sets and what sort of tests I can perform? So for multifactorial trials, of course, we have several options. We have multi-factorial ANOVA, linear regression, clustering, and mixed models. So multi-factor ANOVA is great for these trials because it doesn't only show us the significance of each factor, but it also shows the significance of the interaction. Linear regression, you can see in the bottom right corner, the example from Blumeo, where we have green number and weight correlation across all of our treatments, and it just allows us to visualize how the data is distributed through each point and see whether there is any sort of correlation between those treatments. For the good practices, what are the good practices in terms of statistics? Of course, always checking for assumptions, normality, and homoscedasticity. We will go to Blumeo and I'll show you how these tests are performed. Use visualizations. So in my experience, visualizations usually come as last step in data analytics. When I would have my data sets, then I would perform my stats on them, and then I visualize the significant results. But actually, data visualization is also a very useful initial tool to see your big data sets visualize, especially box plots or radars. They allow you to see the data distribution, and they allow you to see unexpected, perhaps, correlations that you did not look into or plan to look into when you were conducting your trial. So if you have a radar, for example, of course, you are looking into yield or other significant variables that you assume would be impacted. But as you have an overview of all the data, you can say, okay, maybe actually there is also impact in sugar content or acidity that I might want to run some ANOVAs that I didn't think of running before. And of course, ensuring transparency and reproducibility. Now I will switch to Blumeo, and as I'm switching to Blumeo, I would like to ask you another question about what statistical tools you are currently using for your analysis. And we will have an overview later. So here we go. So here we have a trial which has different genotypes and different irrigation modes. And we have a radar where we can see every single combination and what sort of a data distribution we have. We have the same for histogram, where we can identify our top performing combinations and our lowest performing combinations. And we can see the data distribution in box plots or scatter plots as well. Another positive thing of this tool is that you can select specific treatments yourself. So for example, if you only want to visualize irrigation 1, you can deselect all the other treatments and you're only looking at one isolated factor. Now we can go to ANOVA. To show you the normality tests, I will first do the one-way ANOVA, let's say on genotype, it doesn't matter in this case. And let's just pick number of fruits and do my ANOVA. So here you can see, that's what I wanted to show, the checks. So you have the normality and homogeneity checks that have passed, but you have a warning on outliers. So that's how you can say, okay, maybe I need to look at the raw data, maybe I need to exclude some points because the data set is not uniform enough to draw meaningful conclusions. But of course, for multifactorial trials, the more interesting ANOVA is the two-factor ANOVA. And let's choose tomato vigor and perform that ANOVA. So here we can see the impact of the block. So here you want to have low significance. Low significance means that all your blocks were relatively similar, which you want to have throughout your treatment. You don't want the block to have a significant impact on your results. Then you have a significance of the impact of the genotype. As we can see, it's around 5 to 6%. Depending on your risk tolerance, that could be a significant result. So we can say, okay, the genotype is actually making an impact, and irrigation system has more than 10%. So let's say our risk tolerance is 10%, so this is insignificant. And we can also conclude, regardless of your risk tolerance, you can conclude that genotype has more impact than irrigation system. Then you can also look at the interaction, which is the most important, the most interesting part for us. And you can see that the interaction has actually been insignificant on tomato vigor. Okay, I'll just show one dashboard really quickly of overviewing whole trial results. So the visualization of all trial results allows you to see all the treatments easily and have all the different variables visualized, and also the percentage difference between them. The benchmark are fully controllable, so you can see and evaluate the performance. As I mentioned, radar is very interesting to see some sort of unexpected correlations that you might have not thought about before. And maybe we can look at the poll results. Yes, as I expected, most of you are using multifactorial ANOVA, and that's a really good practice and a good test, as it definitely shows us more than one factor's impact, but also the correlation of both factors. That's great. Okay, and the last slide is on meta-analytics. So meta-analytics is very important, and this is what Blue Mayo tool is also very beneficial for. The fact that you have those different trials analyzed, even to an extensive level, it is still important to have layered analysis across years, across locations, across product, across different factors. So you, for example, as I mentioned, you can do correlation of all trials that have been performed at low pH or in specific product or in specific variety across many years or many locations. You can select a Blue Mayo which trials you want to include in the analytics, because maybe some trials were outliers, or maybe the protocol was not complete, or something was off, so you have full flexibility with that. And here we see 2 products. So we select 2 products, and independently on the dosage, because we have all the possible treatments that include that product, we can do an evaluation between those 2 products. So we have product of 1 liter concentration dosage, 3 liter and 5 liter, and we have another product as well. And selecting a benchmark, we can evaluate which one of those treatments was the most successful across all of the trials that you selected, or all of the trials that this product was in. You also have your percentage difference, your radar, which I said is interesting to see some unexpected correlations, box plots. Another very useful visualization is the location visualization on the map. So you are able to clearly see, okay, which location was more beneficial in terms of performance to my product or to my variety. And as I mentioned, these meta-analytical tools can be applied onto any sort of factors that you're doing, because in the agronomy trials, we're not only focusing on product or variety, but we also are looking into many different other factors as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and if you plan to have any questions, please you feel free to email me, and I will be open to discuss anything about multifactorial trials. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.